Slayer, this girl kicked a guy on the head. It was on the ground. It was Demon, and she actually clapped him. This is what in soccer you learn how to do. To go on a curb and you're editing your phone, you might run into a sign.
All right, so this is a graphical depiction of what's realistic, and in cinematics they like hit lights and like it's a big spectacle. So I just did that. There's when I was a kid had blonde hair and blue eyes, and so I shortly thereafterwards, when I had brown hair, as my hair changed, so did my eye color. I started bleaching my hair blonde, and so I just asked this kid because he pulled up and he had his hair bleached blonde if he had blonde hair, and he was like, yeah. I'm like, did you have blue eyes? And he was like, no. So not for nothing, when you're trying to meet like the origin of where you came from, you suffice to bleach. And in interstellar, I mean outer space, if you're putting two and two together, it's what neutron stars are to magnetars. They're hard to find even in catalogs of libraries. And so there was like one hit of what a neutron star is, and it's in a town outside of my county. And I could call for it, but it wouldn't be direct, as in instantaneous.
If only I could be a first responder helping. It's what Batman was about, helping on the first Ave or any Ave. And in any case, I put my credit card into a machine and the machine turned off. This was connected to a screen of a computer. And not for nothing, I asked for a receipt. And then I saw a video and a guy said he put a cat into a bottle. And not for nothing, if you've never seen a flattened animate object, when something becomes flattened, it turns into a object that's now inanimate.
It's coagulating. They're hard to find, even in catalogs of libraries. And so there was like one hit of what a neutron star is, and it's in a town outside of my county. And I could call for it, but it wouldn't be direct, as in instantaneous. Aside from the conversation I had with the kid earlier, direct. Yeah.
All right, and I'm not into things that are dead because they have embalming aerosols coming off them. But look at how this is coagulating puddles around it. This is a bird that's been flattened.
And it makes it for.
And I'm not going in for a close-up, but it's important to note that when something's dead, its bloodstream's gone, and so it is prone to get flattened. And something prone to get flattened, it's probably dead because there's no life force going through it, aka its bloodstream. I saw a video and it had Steel Worldwide and it had ML entering the bloodstream. And I'm saying ML is a abbreviation because I'm keeping it PG. Abbreviations keeping PG. Look at that video on YouTube. Steel Worldwide, ML entering the bloodstream. And you'll get a depiction of what it means. He says there's a cat who went into a bottle. I don't understand what this means. But I understand that timing is everything. So what I'm going to do, I laid out yesterday 2 vectors. One was humans, the human species. The second was the universe. And we put them at their definite values, meaning that they're going to end, because they both will. They're both having a life force. The life force of the universe is controversial, and it falls into the range of alchemy, which got thrown under the bus by pagans because they're obsolete in lines of Christ. And if no one knows what Christ is, the Hindus, the Buddhists, all of them, they think that he was a good person but wasn't the Son of God. And if we're talking about what God is, Jesus was God in the flesh. And then if you're having that 2 in 1, it's where God made the universe. So the universe like being somewhat of an omnipotent being. And I don't know what omnipotent means, but omnipresent. God's like, if you're saying what omnipresent is, the universe by default is present when you're alive or dead, or before you're alive or dead. And so that's what it means to be omnipresent. And we can only understand this with what time is. So when conjunction of by default in time, the universe is an environment, we'd like to think of it as real. And in Earth, as a collective, it has like breathability things like the grass, the algae. It has a life force in it. So the universe as a whole, the totality, it's always expanding. So you can look at that as like the bloodstream always like going through. It's got dark matter and it's always bleeding through empty space, which is expanding in the universe. So we can look at this as like blood, so it's got some real life features of what life would be if we're counting the universe as a definite quantity, because it's going to die. And that's why another feature as it being alive would be counted as. But as far as that's just to wrap up what I couldn't really put my finger on the pulse yesterday, was that humans, we've got a definite amount, universe has a definite amount. But going forth today, in school, we saw what Flat Stanley was out west in Idaho. They taught grade schoolers. This guy was a Flat Stanley. It was a folklore, and he was a piece of paper, and not a stick figure, but a dimension up from a stick figure is a flattened image on a piece of paper. And so this is a Flat Stanley, and we sent him in the mail, and we sent him around like a pen pal, but it was like a carbon copy, if you will, of a inanimate object of a person that's gotten flattened. We called it Flat Stanley. And not for nothing, when life forces leave, the bloodstream stops flowing, things tend to get flattened. And so I really want to throw this ball at the dog, and I'm not prescribed to kick this at the dog. Total miss. I hit the curb. I can't tell you how many curbs are dangerous, how many signs on curbs are dangerous, but between me and you,
this is not a dream.
If you're half retarded or just trying to edit on editing on wheels, don't go on your phone behind the wheel. But if you're using wheels, and we're gonna leave it at that. Look at this dismount curb. Prolific. Doesn't this look historic? I'm liking it. Liking that dismount curb. More on this later. But things go flat, and it's a higher up from a stick figure, which would be iconic to what strings are. String theory. 2 holographics. Holographics are flat. That's the main point in case. An inanimate object is flat. And not for nothing, when you're putting 2 together, you add a life force, and we get what is autonomous features that are the human species. But you can mimic an autonomous with cyborgs. And we're not going into what that range is because our robots aren't here yet. With what in Mortal Kombat, and Star Wars, the whole Clone Wars, and in Mortal Kombat, it's the cyborg takeover. They're autonomous in the 3rd dimension, but they're not fleshed out, except their internals. So, like, on paper, they bypass as one, but between me and you, it's just a cyborg and not actually a human species. though on paper it's hard to prove the difference of the two, and that's probably where we're going with a whole bunch of tables and statistics in 3, 2, 1. So if you're ever in a pen, I'm not going to go into detail with what that means, but in the pen, there's 2 things. Machetes, shout out to Danny Trejo for making the movie Machete, with whatever that might mean. But then also, in the After Prison show on YouTube, they say that they have a cook-off, and they're calling it Shanks. And it's kind of like Punked in the show Punked, but he says it's the After Prison show, and it's called Shanked. And so at the end, if you don't win, you get shanked. And not for nothing, when in the pen, if you see something that is refined, it quite possibly could be a shanked or a machete. Here's one thing that might be one. Let's go in quick for a close-up. I don't know how to depict, because in college they're like, you can see the edging, and I want you to take note. And now I understand why they were making us take note of edgings. We'll see how this performs. Do you see that procedure? And lastly, we'll end on what this procedure means. If you can't see this, it's hidden well, I know, right? It's not a machete, it's like a full-blown katana. We don't want to talk about what katanas are because that shit is effing sketch. Blasting Retha. I'm going to show you a bird that's flattened. But before I show you a bird that's flattened, I'm just going to go ahead and show you. This guy said he put a cat into a bottle. Now, I've seen ships that have been put into bottles. I don't know how that's made, but there's a thing where people collect ships and bottles. Here's a receipt when the receipt machine turned off. And I was like, oh, okay, can I have one? And then, of course, this bottle is non-disclosure, but we're showing what a cat going into a bottle would look like. All right. Stand by. Be on standby. We're going to look at a bird that's flattened because it has water near it. Stand by, it's coagulating.
A neutron star, it evolves into a magnetar if it has XYZ components available to it, and it makes it for a differentiation of how it is derived throughout its lifespan. And that's important because Lawrence Krauss said that all of our light components, meaning elements, are derived from stardust. And that's one way in looking at where the universe is bountiful in with what it is in accordance to what life is. The universe is its lowest common denominator.